Welcome to the Anatomy of Crime ultimate destination for unraveling the mysteries of the dark side of human history. Here, we dive deep into chilling true crime stories, unsolved mysteries, and the psychology behind infamous criminals. If you're fascinated by crime and justice or enjoy exploring the unknown, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and let's uncover the truth, one case at a time. Dr. Marcus Johnson had it all. At 45, he was a respected professor of genetics at the University of Houston, with a beautiful family and a sprawling home in the city's affluent River Oaks neighborhood. His wife, Tanya, was a successful real estate agent, and together they had 4 children: twins Michael and Michelle, 15, Sarah, 12, and little Kevin, 8. To the outside world, the Johnsons were the epitome of the American dream, a successful black family that had overcome societal barriers to achieve greatness. Marcus was particularly proud of his role in mentoring young African-American students, encouraging them to pursue careers in STEM fields. But beneath the surface of this picture-perfect life, a devastating secret was about to explode, shattering the Johnson family forever. It was a warm Houston evening in September 2024. The Johnson family had gathered in their backyard to celebrate Marcus's 46th birthday. The air was filled with the aroma of barbecue and the sound of laughter as friends and family mingled. "Happy birthday, honey," Tanya said, handing Marcus a small, neatly wrapped box. "The kids and I thought you'd love this." Marcus unwrapped the gift, revealing a DNA testing kit from a popular ancestry company. He smiled, genuinely touched by the thoughtful present. "Wow, this is great," he exclaimed. "You know, I've always been curious about our family history. Thanks, everyone." Little did Marcus know that this innocent gift would be the key to unlocking a Pandora's box of secrets that would destroy everything he held dear. A few weeks later, Marcus found himself alone in his home office, carefully following the instructions in the DNA kit. He swabbed the inside of his cheek, sealed the sample, and sent it off to the lab. As a geneticist, he was excited about the prospect of learning more about his ancestry and potentially discovering distant relatives. "Maybe I'll find out I'm related to some African royalty," he joked to himself as he dropped the package in the mailbox. The waiting began. Marcus threw himself into his work, barely giving the test a second thought. He was busy preparing for an important conference where he'd be presenting his latest research on genetic markers for certain hereditary diseases. 6 weeks later, Marcus received an email notification that his results were ready. He waited until he got home that evening, wanting to share the moment with his family. "All right, everyone gather round," he called out excitedly. "Let's see what secrets our DNA holds." The family huddled around Marcus's computer as he logged into the Ancestry website. The page loaded, revealing a colorful pie chart of his genetic makeup. "Look at that," he exclaimed. "Seems like we've got some Nigerian ancestry, just like I always suspected. And, wait, what's this?" Marcus's voice trailed off as he noticed a tab labeled DNA Relatives. Curious, he clicked on it, expecting to see distant cousins or perhaps a long-lost aunt or uncle. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. At the top of the list of DNA relatives were 4 names that Marcus knew all too well: Michael Johnson, Michelle Johnson, Sarah Johnson, and Kevin Johnson. His children. But instead of showing a parent-child relationship, the website indicated that they were his nieces and nephews. This has to be a mistake," Marcus muttered, his hands shaking as he clicked through the profiles. Tanya leaned in, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong, honey?" Marcus couldn't speak. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. How could this be possible? He'd been there for the birth of each of his children. He'd cut the umbilical cords, changed their diapers, watched them grow. "Dad? Dad?" Michelle's voice cut through his thoughts. "Are you okay?" Marcus looked up at his family, or were they really his family, and forced a smile. Yeah, just surprised by some of these results. "Why don't you kids go get started on your homework? I need to talk to your mom for a minute." As the children filed out of the room, Tanya placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus took a deep breath and turned to his wife of 20 years. "Tanya, according to this test, I'm not the father of our children." Tanya's face went pale. She stumbled backward, collapsing into a nearby chair. That's impossible," she whispered. Marcus felt a surge of anger rising within him. Is it, Tanya? Is it really impossible? Because this test is saying that our kids are my nieces and nephews. So unless you've got an explanation, it seems like you've been lying to me for the past 15 years. Tears began to stream down Tanya's face. Marcus, please. I can explain. But Marcus was beyond listening. Years of memories flashed through his mind. The late nights Tanya claimed to be working, the hushed phone conversations, the times she'd been oddly defensive about her schedule. Who is it, Tanya? He demanded, his voice rising. Who's the real father of our children? Tanya buried her face in her hands, her body racked with sobs. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never meant for this to happen. It was Jerome. Marcus felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Jerome Washington had been his best friend since college. They'd been roommates, groomsmen at each other's weddings. Jerome was practically part of the family. He even had a key to their house. Jerome? Marcus repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. My own brother's been fathering my children? Tanya nodded, unable to meet his gaze. It just happened. We never meant to hurt you. We ended it years ago, I swear. Marcus stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. I need some air, he muttered, storming out of the room. As he walked out into the warm Houston night, Marcus felt his world crumbling around him. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his family, his very identity, it had all been a lie. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's life began to unravel. He threw himself into his work, spending long hours at the university lab, avoiding going home as much as possible. When he did return to the house, he could barely look at Tanya or the children without feeling a mix of love, betrayal, and crushing disappointment. The kids, sensing the tension between their parents, became withdrawn. Michael and Michelle's grades began to slip, Sarah stopped attending her dance classes, and little Kevin had started wetting the bed again. Tanya tried repeatedly to talk to Marcus, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But Marcus shut her out, his pain and anger forming an impenetrable wall between them. One night, after a particularly heated argument, Tanya broke down. Marcus, please, she pleaded. I know I made a terrible mistake, but those kids are still yours. You raised them. You loved them. That's what being a father is really about. Marcus looked at her, his eyes cold. And what about Jerome? Does he know? Tanya shook her head. No, he doesn't. I never told him. I couldn't bear to destroy two families. Marcus laughed bitterly. Well, it's a bit late for that, isn't it? As the days turned into weeks, Marcus's behavior became increasingly erratic. He started drinking heavily, missing classes, and lashing out at colleagues. His once promising career began to crumble, much like his home life. It was a crisp October evening when everything came to a head. Marcus had been drinking since early afternoon, ignoring calls from the university about his missed lectures. As he sat in his darkened study, surrounded by empty bottles, he heard the front door open. Marcus? Jerome's voice called out. Tanya called me. She's worried about you, man. We all are. Marcus felt a surge of rage course through him. How dare he? How dare this man, who had betrayed him in the worst possible way, come into his home acting concerned? Stumbling to his feet, Marcus grabbed a heavy paperweight from his desk and made his way to the living room. Jerome was standing there, a look of genuine concern on his face. Hey, brother, we need to talk. His words were cut short as Marcus swung the paperweight, catching Jerome on the side of the head. Jerome crumpled to the floor, blood pooling around him. Marcus stood over his fallen friend, his brother, the father of his children, breathing heavily. In that moment, something inside him snapped. What happened next was a blur of violence and horror. Marcus moved through the house like a man possessed, his rage and pain fueling a rampage that would shock the nation. He found Tanya in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She turned, a hopeful smile on her face that quickly turned to terror as she saw the blood on Marcus's hands. Marcus, what have you? Her words were cut short as Marcus lunged forward, his hands closing around her throat. Tanya struggled, her nails clawing at his arms, but Marcus was beyond feeling pain. He watched with detached fascination as the light faded from her eyes. Oh, Marcus, what have you done? The commotion had drawn the attention of the children. Michael and Michelle, the twins, appeared in the doorway, their faces masks of shock and fear. Dad? Michael's voice quavered. What's going on? Marcus turned to face them, a twisted smile on his face. I'm not your dad, he said softly. I never was. Oh no, are the kids to be blamed for the action of their mother? What followed was a scene of unimaginable horror. Marcus, the man who had once read bedtime stories and kissed scraped knees, turned on the children he had raised as his own. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with screams and the sickening sounds of violence. Do you think his anger has overpowered him? If you were in his shoe, what would be your reaction? When it was over, Marcus stood in the blood-soaked living room, surrounded by the bodies of his family. He looked down at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time, and began to laugh, a chilling, mirthless sound that carried into the quiet Houston night. The Johnson family massacre sent shockwaves through Houston and beyond. News outlets across the country ran stories about the respected professor who had snapped, killing his entire family in a fit of rage. As details of the tragedy emerged, a picture began to form of a man pushed to the brink by a devastating betrayal. The DNA test results, the affair between Tanya and Jerome, the years of deception, it all came to light in the harsh glare of the media spotlight. The academic community was stunned. Marcus Johnson had been seen as a role model, a beacon of success for young African Americans in STEM fields. Now, his legacy was forever tarnished by this unthinkable act of violence. In the days following the massacre, vigils were held across Houston. Students and colleagues gathered on the University of Houston campus, lighting candles and sharing memories of the Johnson family. Many struggled to reconcile the kind, brilliant professor they knew with the monster he had become. Marcus Johnson's trial began 6 months after the massacre. The courtroom was packed each day, with journalists and curious onlookers vying for seats to witness one of the most sensational cases in Houston's history. The prosecution painted a picture of a man consumed by rage and jealousy who had chosen to destroy his family rather than face the truth of his situation. They presented evidence of Marcus's erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to the killings, as well as testimony from colleagues who had noticed his declining mental state. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Marcus had suffered a psychotic break brought on by the immense emotional trauma of discovering his children were not biologically his. They brought in expert witnesses who testified about the psychological impact of such a revelation, arguing that Marcus had not been in his right mind at the time of the killings. Throughout the trial, Marcus sat silently at the defense table, his once proud posture now slumped and defeated. He barely reacted as witness after witness took the stand, recounting the horror of that night and the lives that had been lost. After weeks of testimony and 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the foreman stood to deliver the decision. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Tanya Johnson, we find the defendant, Marcus Johnson, guilty. The foreman continued, listing out the verdicts for each of the other murders: Jerome, Michael, Michelle, Sarah, and Kevin. Guilty on all counts. As the verdicts were read, a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Marcus showed no emotion, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance, as if he were no longer present in the room. The judge thanked the jury for their service and set a date for sentencing. As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, reporters rushed out to break the news to the world. Dr. Marcus Johnson, once a respected professor and family man, would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Years passed, and the Johnson family massacre faded from the headlines, becoming another tragic footnote in Houston's history. But for those who had known the Johnsons, the pain and confusion lingered. In a maximum security prison on the outskirts of Houston, Marcus Johnson sat in his cell, surrounded by the ghosts of his past. He had long since stopped trying to rationalize what he had done. The anger that had consumed him had burned out, leaving behind only a hollow shell of the man he once was. He thought often of his children, not as the nieces and nephews that DNA had declared them to be, but as the sons and daughters he had raised and loved. He remembered Michael's first steps, Michelle's beautiful singing voice, Sarah's infectious laugh, and Kevin's curious nature. In the quiet of his cell, he allowed himself to mourn not just for the lives he had taken, but for the future he had stolen from them. Visitors were rare, but occasionally, a former student or colleague would make the journey to see him. They always asked the same question: why? Why had he done it? Marcus never had an answer that satisfied them, or himself. One day, a young genetics student named Aisha came to visit. She had been in one of Marcus's last classes before the massacre and had always looked up to him as a mentor. "Dr. Johnson," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I've been struggling to understand what happened. How could science, the thing you loved so much, lead to such tragedy?" Marcus was silent for a long moment, considering her question. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Science, Asha, is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used to build or to destroy. It can reveal truths we're not ready to face. In my case, it revealed a truth that shattered the foundation of my life. But the tragedy wasn't in the revelation. It was in my reaction to it." He paused, his eyes distant. "I let my pride, my anger, my sense of betrayal override everything else. My love for my family, my ethical principles, my very humanity. I forgot that being a father is about more than DNA. It's about love, sacrifice, and commitment. I had all of that, and I threw it away in a moment of blind rage." Aisha listened intently, tears forming in her eyes. "Do you regret taking the DNA test?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, the test didn't kill my family. I did. Knowledge isn't the enemy. It's what we do with that knowledge that defines us. I made the wrong choice, and I'll spend the rest of my life paying for it." As Aisha left the prison that day, she carried with her a heavy heart and a new understanding of the responsibility that comes with scientific knowledge. The story of Marcus Johnson and his family would stay with her throughout her career, a constant reminder of the human element in scientific discovery. 10 years after the Johnson family massacre, the University of Houston established the Johnson Memorial Scholarship. Despite the controversy surrounding Marcus's actions, the university chose to honor the memory of Tanya, Michael, Michelle, Sarah, and Kevin by providing opportunities for underprivileged students to pursue careers in STEM fields. The scholarship became a symbol of hope rising from tragedy, a way to create something positive from an unthinkable act of violence. Each year, as new scholars were announced, the Houston community was reminded of the lives lost and the importance of compassion, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. In his prison cell, Marcus Johnson heard about the scholarship through a news report. For the first time in years, he wept, not just for what he had lost, but for the possibility that some good might come from the ashes of his shattered life. The Johnson family's story became a cautionary tale, discussed in ethics classes and genetic counseling sessions. It sparked debates about the implications of easily accessible DNA testing and the potential consequences of uncovering family secrets. But beyond the academic discussions and media narratives, the tragedy served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the devastating power of unchecked emotions. It was a story of how quickly a life built on love and success could crumble when faced with an unexpected truth. As Houston continued to grow and change, the memory of the Johnson family lingered. A somber footnote in the city's history, a whispered warning about the secrets we keep and the truths we seek, and a poignant reminder that family is defined by love, not just by blood. In the end, the legacy of the Johnson family was not the violent act that tore them apart, but the lessons learned from their tragedy. Lessons about forgiveness, about the true meaning of parenthood, and about the complex interplay between scientific truth and human emotion. Their story would continue to resonate, a haunting melody in the symphony of human experience, reminding us all of the delicate balance between who do you think is to be held responsible. Marcus, whose only crime was loving his family, but he let his feeling overcome him, leading him into committing his worst nightmare by killing the family he loves, care for and cater for with his own hand. Or Tanya, a wife who vowed to stand by her husband, to be loyal and honest in your commitment. Choosing to commit adultery with someone else, knowing it undermines that trust, is a betrayal not just of him, but of the bond you both built. If something is missing, the answer should have been an honest conversation, not a decision that causes pain and disrespects your marriage. Jerome Washington, what he has done is beyond disappointing. To betray not just his friend, but also the trust and sanctity of his marriage is an act of profound selfishness and disregard for the lives he has hurt. Friendship is built on loyalty and respect, and marriage is sacred. Yet you had chose to violate both for your own desires. It's hard to comprehend how someone could cross such a boundary, knowing the damage it would cause. Actions like this don't just ruin relationships, they destroy character and trust, leaving scars that may never heal. I hope he truly understands. This isn't something easily forgiven or forgotten. Let us know in the comment section, and please don't forget to subscribe to get more section. Thank you.